you, Director Johnson. I will now turn the screen over to Amanda Lefevre, Deputy Commissioner, Kentucky Department for Environmental Protection, for today's final session.
Okay, everyone, and I want to say we're saving the best for last, and certainly something I'm very excited about. And you guys and gals have heard us talk about environmental justice framework and talk about diversity and inclusion work here in the cabinet. And this is very critical and important work as we look to build better communities and a better environment. So I'm confident that our last speaker will provide you with some inspiration as we dive into these topic areas. So I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Serenity Wright. Dr. Wright earned her doctorate from the University of Kentucky in Policy Studies, Measurement, and Evaluation. Her research interests include equity and access to opportunities. Dr. Wright employs a hard science approach through a lens of cultural competency for her theoretical orientation. She taught high school for 8 years, served as the Associate Dean for Diversity and International Studies, Student Services at Transylvania University, worked in city government, and is currently serving as the Gatton Honors Pathway Director and the Co-Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the Gatton College of Business and Economics at the University of Kentucky. So with that, Dr. Wright, I hand it over to you.
Well, thanks, Amanda. I appreciate it. Hello, everyone. I'm very excited to be sharing time with all of you today, and to just be a piece of your journey on environmental justice and understanding all the different resources and opportunities available to you. Yesterday, Secretary Goodman started us off strong in laying the foundation of the commitment and framework for the implementation of environmental justice. Her statement that equity, inclusion, and justice are vital for this cabinet is critical to our commitment to move forward. I hope I can help you walk away with some tools for how to do that. And so as we begin, please know that I'm acutely aware that conversations related to equity, inclusion, and more specifically justice can be frustrating. Sometimes it can be triggering, and sometimes it can be often very overwhelming. Several speakers over the last day and a half have mentioned the amount of work that needs to be done, the amount of resources that are coming for you. And so I get it, that not only is it overwhelming, but it can seem Sisyphean. So if you spent the last 36 hours thinking, but I don't even know where to begin, there's so much to do, I'm not sure how this applies to me. Yes, my friends, welcome. And for all of my UK fans out there, this is where we say it's a party. So I genuinely hope that in my few minutes with you this morning, and as the last dance in this particular party, I will be able to leave you with some proactive, tangible action items that you can use immediately, either for you personally or within your workplace or in your community. So today I'm going to discuss 3 points: lenses and thinking caps, logic models, and next steps. So lenses and thinking caps. This is how we conceptually frame what it is that we're talking about today. And the assumption that I am making is that you all know and have internalized that we have bias, that we have different understandings for how we perceive our work and the work that needs to be done. And we all do. Some of us love to skydive or run marathons, and some thinks it's crazy. Some of us paint our faces and scream till we're hoarse at sporting events, and others find that ridiculous. You know, I grew up poor in a developing nation, which we'll talk about later. And so I have a really hard time when I'm with friends who, and family members in particular, who leave lights on everywhere or an external facing door open, especially in the wintertime, or stand at the refrigerator for too long with the door open, because of the ways in which I view these as acts of entitlement, a lack of awareness about bills and cost and waste, a passive-aggressive dig about how hard I have to be able to work to pay my said bills related to these items, right? So we have biases about all kinds of things. There's diversity in our bias. Friends, this is not what today is about. Today is not about recognizing bias or even having that conversation. This is about starting the conversation for what we do about it and how that applies to equity and inclusion and justice, specifically how it applies for environmental justice, and the work that we do in creating and implementing policy. This is about how we adjust, address, and change systems that do not allow for equity and access. This is about creating inclusive communities to enhance economic development. And it's not about exposing gaps, but being able to acknowledge areas of growth within our communities of practice and implementing a strategic plan to improve them. Again, this is a consistent process. There is no end. So just like with any sustainable business plan or strategic plan, our communities of practice or workplaces should be constantly adjusting, changing, evolving. This morning, I hope to shift how we think about and react to conversations, initiatives, policy changes, and issues regarding equity, inclusion, and justice. We know there are areas where communities are disproportionately served, and evaluating our policies and processes should be a continuous process. As conversations related to equity, inclusion, and justice have become more common and overt over the last several years, it has taken on a social identification of its own. And the shared expectation is that conversations related to equity and inclusion, and especially justice, are only around race, socioeconomic status, gender, sexual orientation, etc. But diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, and accessibility is also, and more importantly, about food, basic needs, activities, job opportunities, permits, bills, educational access, etc. And, oh yes, my friend, there is an and it is in all caps, so I'm basically yelling it at you, and how all of these elements overlap, intersect, and collide. As you experience the summit and the different sessions that have been offered over the last day and a half, I hope you didn't just listen, I hope you heard, meaning you respect and make space for the thoughts, opinions, data provided, systems offered, resources that are coming for those around you, and how you can use them to help make your work better. Maybe there were topics or conversations that made you uncomfortable, or you didn't understand or couldn't relate to. I hope you follow up on those areas for more understanding, more support, more engagement. Only in doing this can we work together to create communities where every member feels they can access the basics that they need to do more than just survive. They can provide for their families, they can offer opportunities for their employees, they can thrive as engaged members of sustainable communities. And so how are we understanding and thinking about these changes that need to happen? One of the most important words that I would like for us to briefly discuss today in order to reframe how we think about and execute equity, inclusion, and justice initiatives is the word bias. Bias is one of those words that has garnered a negative connotation to it. And when you hear it, it automatically incites a bad feeling. And it puts people on the defensive. But bias in and of itself is not bad. So I'm going to say that one more time. Bias is not bad. The socially constructed weight that has become attached to the word is what we need to work on. Bias is the lens in which we understand the world, the cultural capital that you are using in order to operate within a place. And this is critical for how we understand the policies and processes that we put into place. This means the environment, culture, systems, experiences in which you were raised create your lens. It's like putting on multiple pairs of sunglasses or changing out your sunglasses. So this is where we start to talk about the lenses that we have and how it impacts what we do. So to demonstrate, I was raised in a village in Indonesia. So I was not raised here. We were poor. We had one hot plate to cook with, no shower. We boiled the bugs out of our food before we could eat it. Poor. I was baptized Catholic at birth, raised Buddhist in a Muslim country, and now attend a Christian church. We don't have time for the complexities and questions that come with my understanding of religion. That's different presentation on another day. I was a competitive athlete and competed internationally. Competition, team, these are things that drive me, and they are true strengths of mine, but they can also be really areas of growth for me, depending on how I'm exerting these characteristics and how I understand what it means to work with others and in growing and supporting others. Twice in my life, I've been enrolled in a school where I didn't understand how to learn, didn't speak the language, and didn't understand the grading system. Out of space on my face, but we're going to try and balance that there. Then there are the complexities of family, but you know, whose family isn't complex? So we'll leave that one out, but okay. I keep going, but you get the point. The point is, other than me looking like a fool, this visual is intentional for numerous reasons. These sunglasses represent our phenomenology, how we know and understand what we know. The intent is to demonstrate that at no point can we see the world and manage interactions through all of the lenses that have shaped who we are as individuals. This lens switching, constantly changing how I'm perceiving and understanding the work that I do, the policies that I read and evaluate, and the processes that I put in place, these lenses in which we are looking through and therefore interacting with the world are constantly changing. I intentionally showed sunglasses to represent this point about perspective and how we operate within a community of any size, because it visually helps you see the complexities of all the ways that elements of your background can and do intersect and impact how you engage with the world. But also because they're tinted. I'm not using glasses, I'm using sunglasses, devices that help protect our eyes from bright light, from something that could cause harm. It is something that creates a film so things aren't as crisp or as clear. In the same way, when we are not aware of the lens in which we are viewing a policy or process, we are guarding ourselves from all of the elements that are contributing to that situation. We are guarding ourselves from all of the ways members of our community cannot access or understand that information. We have applied our own tint. I want you to start reflecting on all of the lenses that you have. Are you a veteran? Are you multilingual? What type of family did you grow up in? Where did you grow up? Urban, suburban, type of home, large or small community? Did you work growing up? Do you have different physical abilities? Do you have different learning abilities? Did you have to take care of siblings or other young children in your home, or a parent or a grandparent? Do you have debt? Do you own a car? Do you own a home? Is there a medical condition that requires special medicine or foods? I could go on and on and on, and I would encourage you to make a list of these different elements of your identity, of your background, all the sunglasses that are sitting in your drawer. And you will reflect differently on these things when you see them written down, because being acutely and overtly aware of them will help you internalize and conceptualize the information that you have received during the summit, and then how to apply it to your workspace, organization, and community. But you have to know what your sunglasses are in your drawer first and what they look like. Inclusion, equity, justice is about people. It's about ensuring each and every individual in our communities can thrive. When we work to ensure that the most marginalized members of our communities can and do access opportunities available for building sustainable people, sustainable families, and sustainable communities, our communities will consistently evolve and develop. So those were our lenses. What are our thinking caps? Who are we not thinking about when implementing a process for a specific policy? Is it the people who work second and third shift because we only work first shift? Maybe I don't have a laptop or iPad. Is the form I need to complete fillable through my smartphone? Mr. Fry's presentation just a second ago, brilliant. It was auditory. People could watch, learn, understand. What if I don't have access to technology though? How can I request something to be mailed? Is it accessible in my dominant language? What if I am missing fingers or hands and can't write or type? Is it voice operable? Like the video, if I have a vision impairment, what are my options for helping understand? The audio piece that came with the movement, so helpful in his presentation for understanding how to complete that form. So here we are, all the different things that we have to think about. Just quickly, just briefly on what I observed in the last few minutes leading up to this presentation. And I'm not asking you to remove every hurdle, but are you working towards an option to help people around the hurdle? So I'm sure this will go great. I can't see myself, so we'll pretend that my hair's fine now. All right, so logic models, part 2. Again, today is about moving from conversation to action items that will keep our policies, processes, and organizations focused on the people that they serve. When we acknowledge a gap or community need, what do we do with this information? How do we move forward? How do we make our communities better? This is typically where community and business leaders that I have supported on various projects start to get overwhelmed. And they're like, yeah, what do we do? There is so much to do. Deep breaths, it'll be okay. You're all experts in backward design or strategic planning or strategic development, however you want to think about it. These are our strengths. So stay grounded in your strengths. This isn't any different. Emotions or frustrations become heightened when we lose sight of the individual, when we lose sight of the humanity that is at the core of the work that we're trying to do, and we only get focused on the actual policy. So build out the logic model. I'm not kidding, right? This is what helps my brain. I'm a policy analyst by trade, right? Build out the logic model, write it out. Change your outcomes or change your outputs to be members of the community that need access to what you do, right? Think through who you're trying to serve and what they need in order to be successful, in order to help the community thrive. Write it down in the categories as they apply appropriately. Regardless of the sector that you are in, a common topic right now is grounded in demographic justice, demographic equity. How are we working to make sure all the different sectors of our communities are being served? We've heard it today in all the different elements, when it has worked and when it hasn't, when support has met the need and when support meant changing how we understood it. I have been supporting anti-marginalizing and anti-discriminatory work for over 16 years. And the main questions, the core of the concern, hasn't changed, right? It's all about numbers or data and then what to do with it, right? So whether it's in my own work or when people or organizations ask me to support their growth and development in equity and justice, we're always being asked, what is it? What are your numbers? And what do we do about it? Especially when people feel as though the response won't be received well because numbers are low or the data isn't there or the resources aren't available. They don't have a plan to address the inequity or the injustice. Look, this should not be a surprise to anyone. Everybody is growing in this space. The norm is a need to improve in this area. So here is what I do and what I tell people. Own it. Just own it. It's that easy. Be honest and be transparent. Now there's a caveat to this, right? It can't be, well, we don't have any, or we haven't done anything. Oh, well, that's fine. No, own it, but have your action plan ready. Show where you're trying to make things better or to understand. Ask and get input from the community. Have a description of the ways that you are working towards equity and justice. We don't need drastic and massive changes. We need consistent changes. You can have a list of resources that shows how your community is ready to welcome new people, partner with your chambers of commerce on this, how you are working to support people through the hurdles that we've already discussed. How are you actively seeking to support and help make change? One very simple and easy takeaway as you make a list of your own lenses and thinking caps, right? Don't forget where we started. All of these pieces work together. You have to reflect on your own identity, those lenses, those thinking caps, before you can be focused on and support the various identities of someone else. So think about the resources you need to support the different elements of who you are and what you do, right? How you serve the community. Go to the public library and try and access a website for a permit. Go stand in line in a public service office. Can you read all of the signs? Can you hear and understand all of the employees? I think we've all gotten a heavy dose of this over the last 18 months with the addition of masks and different types of masks to serve different people. But can you find foods and support medical or cultural or personal needs? Can you find a medical practitioner in your community that meets your physical, mental, and emotional needs? Can you find services to support a child with different learning abilities or an aging adult who needs special services? If the answer is no to any of these, Voila. Now you have your action items and a place to start. So what are the next steps, right? We've started to fill out the logic model in terms of what are our outcomes, what are our needs, what are our resources that we need to have in place in order to serve, right? In order to serve our communities. That long-term goal and objective should be about sustainable communities and justice and equity. So how do we get the processes in our infrastructure and the resources in our community to support the people? If the answer is yes, as you go through the series of questions with how can I, but can I, am I able to, then go back to the very beginning of the conversation, back to our phenomenology, right? Back to how we know what we know, those lenses that help us know how to navigate the systems. How did you know where to find that information? How long did it take you to find the information you were looking for? Would everyone know how to execute the same search process? Start making lists of all the options that support these questions. Match it in your logic model with the demographic data in your community. Does everyone have those options? That's options with capital F, plural. A medical practitioner who supports your mental, emotional, medical needs may not support mine. Can I apply for a housing permit? Do I know I need a permit to build a tiny house in my backyard? It's not just a shed. Do I know I need a permit to build a porch? I'm not actually changing the structure because it's not connected to the house. I may or may not be speaking from personal experience about things I've learned the hard way, but the point is, where are you making assumptions around what people know? And there need to be options. There needs to be the educational component, which is what Secretary Goodman started us with yesterday. How are we educating people on what they need to know, right? And I heard it referenced earlier, the data's not done, so don't run away with it, right? The data in this particular sense should never be done. We should constantly be gathering data and moving forward with the information that we have. Then be thinking about how you make the resource information accessible, the education piece, right? I had an issue with a bill once, and the response I got back from a council person's aide was, well, you should have signed up for our newsletter and you would have known that this was coming and that it was going to be a problem. Yep, you can imagine how well that went over. Seriously, I should have known to sign up for your newsletter? Okay. But when I clapped back, because I definitely did, and it was good, it was no longer about me. It's never about me when I exert myself as Dr. Wright, as the policy and evaluation specialist. It was about everyone else who doesn't know how to advocate for support, who doesn't have the time during the day to sit on hold, to access a council person for help, to sit on hold, to access a manager at the company that had charged the inappropriate bill, or doesn't have the funds to pay the bill upfront in good faith, which is what I was told to do, of being reimbursed later. Distribution and reception has to be accessible. Are you thinking about making sure the resource is being offered to the people? Or are you insistent that the people find the resources on their own? Hashtag sign up for the newsletter. Just because it is out there doesn't mean they know how to find it. If the approach is, well, I can find it so anyone can find it, you've lost sight of being people-centered. You've forgotten that your own lenses in your drawer is what helped you figure that out. And now nobody and not everybody is going to have the exact same lenses in their drawer as you do. Or is it in a language that they can understand? Do you need it in Braille? Are there common languages other than English that it needs to be printed in? Friends, this isn't the 100-meter hurdles in the Olympics. We should be running alongside our communities, right? Allison Smith talked about this earlier in their oops, but fixed it, right? Sometimes we'll miss one, but that's okay. Fix it. Stay people-centered. Sometimes the hurdle will trip someone up and they will fall. That's okay. Be there to help them up and remove it for the next one. Fix it. Be better. Know more. Be people-centered. A little piece of advice, don't get lost in the comparison game as you work on community development for equity, inclusion, and justice. Too often I hear, well, we're not X, or we'll never be, or we can't do, we don't serve. Stay focused on your people, your organization and community needs. How do you help the people in your constituent bucket? What will your community need to continue to grow and develop? What does your community need to continue to attract jobs and opportunities, to be sustainable, to stay relevant and innovative and exciting? What does your community need to keep its talent? Or do you encourage your young people to leave and never come back? Are you working to grow so they never want to leave, or they can't wait to come back and contribute to the community that they were raised in, the community that they love, that they were supported in? Okay, Dr. Wright, I'm still very overwhelmed. This is a whole lot. So what are the other ways that I can make sure I'm focusing on the people? Because I can't understand any of that. How do I make sure I'm removing my tinted sunglasses so I clearly see the people in my community? There's an activity that I do when conducting workshops, and it asks people to write down the 10 people that you most talk to on a daily basis, right? I typically have people flip through their cell phone, look at their texts and recent calls. Who are the 10 people that always show up in your texts and phone calls in the recent section? Then indicate who is similar to you in terms of job type, job title, age, race, ethnicity, gender, religion, sexual orientation. When you're done, evaluate your list. This helps you create a visual for the thinking caps that you might be missing. This helps you create a visual for the thinking caps that you may need help borrowing or purchasing or learning about. You can do the same thing with your stakeholders, customers, and constituents. Who is readily, consistently accessing the information that you're offering to them? Not the people who are calling going, I couldn't fill it out or I couldn't get it figured out. Those are the ones where you need help with your thinking cap. So make a visual of who you are serving. And does it match who your company or organization wants to serve and should be serving? Does your community have organizations that serve every demographic? If not, how can you create or attract organizations that can help to close these gaps? This is not a quick process. You should not expect immediate results. The expectation, again, should be consistent results. So as some final closing, easy things to remember, as I hope you see the concentric circles around lenses and thinking caps, action items, but how the logic model is really holding all of these things together. Focus on the individual, ask, get out and talk to people, right? You've heard this over and over. Let them know you see them and value them and you want to support them. Be part of a community needs assessment. I promise someone in your area, in your community has this. A United Way, Bluegrass Community Trust, there's going to be an organization, a community organization that is doing this. If not, partner with them to help you gain the data that you need to identify your lenses and thinking caps, to help you build the logic model on who you still need to serve and include in that space. Talk about your mistakes. Find a community practice, a community of practice. Start here with the group that is here today. Share your opportunities of growth. Own them. We're all going to grow together, but only in talking about it can we continue to grow together. And I cannot reinforce this enough. Be honest and transparent. Get people excited about where you want to go, the community that you want to become, and invite them along for the journey. Embrace the challenge. Only in an intense environment can we find clarity and courage. And so I hope those help you think through, what do we do next? What's coming next? I'm always happy to help you think about how it applies for your particular area or how you can use this information to help you. But I am all done with formal comments, and we'll, I don't know if I facilitate questions. Here's Amanda.
Well, I don't know if we have any questions out there right now.
We have a couple questions. Our first question is, what is the best way to move towards building bridges in this day and time of opposition and polarization on so many issues?
Yep, don't assume you know, right? Go back to the talk piece. Be careful in your language, right? There's a difference between volunteerism and engagement. We know that, right? And people know and understand, they can feel when the question isn't genuine, when the conversation isn't genuine. So make sure you're focused on the relationship piece as opposed to the data gathering piece, right? Too often we approach different segments of our community and say, well, just tell us what you need. We're here to help, tell us what you need. But you're asking for a level of vulnerability that doesn't have the rapport available yet, right? So how can we serve you? Be a space to serve the community first. Start in neighborhood meetings, just go and listen. You don't need to make yourself known. Nobody needs to know you're there, right? Start in community meetings where you're in there with them and listening. And then maybe you hear a way that you can help them. And it might not be in this immediate sector, right? Maybe it's not in clean water, but maybe it is in cleaning up trash in the neighborhood playground. Be a part of the community. Help them see that you're truly there to be their friend and to be in partnership. Then when you do ask the question about, well, what do you need from us? They're more likely to engage. But you've got to understand that what you're asking them for is vulnerability, and you've got to earn that trust first before you do that. So best practice for me, go and serve the community first before you ask them to provide information for you.
Our second question is, could you touch on the difference between communication and engagement and community engagement?
Yep. Communication is delivery. I am telling you. Think more, I would differentiate it between communication and education, right? If I'm just spitting out and providing information, but I'm not thinking about all the elements that you need to understand that, I'm not teaching you anything. I'm not educating you. I'm just providing you with communication and hoping you know all the words and how they come together, right? So communication is more information dissemination. Engagement is working together. There's a true discourse and dialogue. Engagement it's a partnership, it's a relationship, it's things that come together. When a segment of a community and an organization come together and they're working for and with each other, that's engagement, not at or to. That's volunteerism, right? We want to be working for and with, in partnership with our communities. And sometimes we just have to do what they need, right? Before I enter any partnership, I ask, what do they need? Sometimes we just need volunteers for right now because we can't think about anything else. Sometimes the need is support in accounting for nonprofits or whatever it might be, but let them identify, don't tell them, right? Don't tell them what you think they need. That's not engagement. That's you forcing your opinion upon that community group or organization. And then Larry, I'm sorry, what was the last one? Community engagement, right?
And good steps to community engagement.
Yep. It takes time. You have to be willing to commit the time. And so engaging with a community is about leveraging partnerships and relationships, right? I'm back to the trust piece. Somebody who works with you or in your friend group is going to already have a personal connection, right? That's best case scenario. If you're starting from scratch, again, be a friend, focus on the human. All of this is grounded in who the person is on the other side, who that community group is on the other side. When you lose sight of the people, of the human, of the humanity piece to it, that's when it becomes contentious, because then we start pushing the policy, the communication. Well, you should have done X, Y, and Z. Well, you need to make sure blah, blah, blah. You can't get there. And if you find that frustration coming, take a step back and breathe. Remind yourself of your thinking caps and lenses and everything else that they're also balancing. So as you think about community engagement, how are we being a friend to? How are we educating with and for? Who are we partnering with? Are we working with our neighborhood community organizations? Are we working with our schools? Are we working with our ag extension offices? Who are we partnered with? None of this should be done in silo or alone. People are connected. So who's in your community who's going to know and make those connections? Build your spider web, right, of connections to help you connect with that community so that what you're hearing is genuine and honest feedback for how they need support. That will drive the engagement. But build the web of connections. And again, I cannot emphasize enough, write it all out. Use whiteboards, giant sticky notes. The visuals truly do matter so that you can really see where those social networks are. Those network connectivity connections will help with engagement and then help you build out your systems for support.
Amanda, do we have time for one more question? Yes, okay. How does a state agency acknowledge, address, and involve community members and their equity concerns when statutes and regulations limit a regulatory agency?
Yes, isn't that great, right? I gotta say, I giggled a little at Secretary Goodman's stance yesterday because that's the crux of it, right? Like the call is do more, be better. But not all of the regulations have caught up with the call to action. So what do you do in that space? One, you can only do what you can do inside of that space, but that doesn't change you being an advocate for what needs to be done. And not just in terms of policy and governmental regulation, but in the community as well. Your organization, your governmental office can still do good work, can still be in partnership with, can still be engaged with communities before the regulation catches up. It can't be an excuse, right? It can't be, oh, well, I'm not allowed yet, so we'll wait until that regulation changes. If we always waited on anything until the regulation changes, communities would never move forward, right? So again, I'm back to the partnership piece. How are you working with your community United Way or your area community action council? That's what we have in Fayette County. Other counties will have something similar. But how are you working with them to help find other ways that you can support them so that your name is still out there, that we are still trying? We hear you, we're here for you, and we are trying through these other avenues until we can get the regulations to catch up with what the call to action really is, right? And for me, it's not so much of what can we do, it's what you cannot do. And what you cannot do is turn around to that community and say, well, we'll get back to you when the policies change and when the regulations catch up, because then you're not really in it, right? You're not really trying to engage and partner with. There are ways. You just got to be a little creative, right? Some inclusive innovation to make sure that happens. But that's where you should lean on your community partners to help you figure out how you can work to support until the regulations catch up.
Awesome. Is that it? Is that it, Larry? For questions?
Yep.